Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad on what feels like a very strange week to be doing a podcast.
This is the first time I've ever had a week where I was like, Jesus Christ, I need to do a politics podcast so I can get this out of my system.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I can't talk if I'm not on a podcast, it turns out.
Yes.
How are you doing, man?
I'm all right. I mean, we ping-ponged a bunch of non-politics, non-current events related topics back and forth last night. And
it seemed cowardly.
None of them felt right.
Yeah, I mean, I asked we asked the Discord too, and they had a bunch of great ideas for episodes that weren't going to happen this week, but we'll do them in the future.
I don't know if I'd say cowardly so much as just like, I don't know the term for it. It just didn't feel right to talk about anything else. I mean, how do you record a podcast 3 or 4 days after the attempted violent overthrow of your government and talk about something the state of VR headsets?
Yeah, it's funny. Like the common wisdom in our spaces in our, is to stay in that we're supposed to stay in our lane and not talk about politics stuff because we might lose some of our audience. So let's get this out of the way up front. Gita from Vice was asking about this on Twitter the other day, and I responded the same way I respond to people in my Twitch channel when they ask me why I talk about politics in my Twitch channel, and they say they'd rather not. I'm like, well, here's the deal. If you support the current regime in the United States, I don't want your time or money or presence in my spaces. So yes,
I'm comfortable saying that as well. Yeah, and also fuck classifying this and what's just happened as mundane everyday, like day-to-day politics. I mean, this is like history at this point.
Yeah, we're not talking about budget deficits. We're talking about
like we seriously have just experienced one of the gravest days in American history. Not 96 hours ago, something like that.
Well, and so the reason I feel this way, and I think that you had similar experiences too along the way, is that at some point I got an email early and tested, and somebody was like, hey, I know where you're from and I know what you believe, but I get that you have to be quiet about it because of who you are and what you do for a living. And I was like, oh, fuck this. This is not okay. No, if you think I'm on the side of the people that think some people aren't people and some people are less human than other people and don't deserve the same rights as everybody else, get wrecked. I want nothing to do with you. So anyway, enough of that.
Yes. But here we are responsible for producing a tech podcast on this week of all weeks. And like, I don't know. I guess we're just going to chat about it for a little bit and see where it goes. But I think there are some, and some of this came out of the Discord. There are some tech angles that we could examine this from.
And also, I mean, a long time ago, when I was 18 years old, I thought I wanted to go into politics, and I spent a couple of summers, a month or two, for a couple of summers as an intern on Capitol Hill.
And then you quickly turned and ran screaming.
And the first time I was like, oh yeah, this seems okay. And then the second I was like, no, I'm done. F this.
But yeah, your brief history as a congressional staffer was kind of what I figured we would start with. And I know it was what did you say about 20 years ago?
93, 94. Were the two times that I was there.
That's longer than that.
It's almost 30 years.
That is for numerous reasons. That is basically a different government at that point, both from the level of like tech that was being employed in the day-to-day operation of the government, and also like, I don't know how much you want to get into it. I mean, ideologically, that was like just prior to the era of extreme polarization. So I'm sure your experiences then were maybe not 100% relevant to now, but I'm still curious.
They're absolutely not relevant to now. The time I was there, the beginning was the year that they voted on NAFTA, which was the big issue the first summer I was there. Yeah. It was also as Newt Gingrich was gaining power.
That was the era of polarization I was referring to. Yeah, specifically.
That was a moment that the Newt Gingrich gaining power was the moment that I was like, oh, I don't want anything. There were two things that made me realize I didn't want anything to do with it. One was that the fact that one of my jobs one summer was to escort, like make sure that if one of our legislative assistants was walking through certain parts of the Capitol, that somebody was with her. One of the interns was walking with her so she wouldn't be harassed by members as much. Like, just to be clear, elected representatives of the House, so that this 40-year-old woman who was recently divorced would not be harassed by the elected representatives of our government. It was the 90s. It was a bad time.
Yes. Yeah.
The other
And things have only gotten worse.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing was it became really clear that the Republicans were going in a direction. The first summer I was there, I drove I was an intern. So my job was threefold. I answered mail, not emails, mails and faxes. And I would collect them and sort them and feed the people's names and addresses into our Wang mini computer. And then I would refer the complicated ones to full-time staffers, and the ones that were just like, hey, I think NAFTA sucks, or I think NAFTA rules, I would generate a form letter tailored for that person and print it on the Wang mini computer, which is funny to think about.
Wow.
If you don't know what a mini computer is, it is a giant ass computer box that like 5 or 6 terminals were connected to, and they shared time. And I think we had a spreadsheet, a word processor, and the most minimal database imaginable that were accessible on that thing.
Huh. Interesting. So yeah. Can you speak to like, so like the tech experience of working on the Hill, I'm sure is completely different at this point.
God, I should hope so.
But some of the like cultural and political aspects, I'm sure, are pretty consistent. Like, can you speak to like how much those letters and calls make a difference? How much are on an individual basis? How much are they acknowledged and passed along, and like how much of an impact do they make? Because I mean, I would say we are in unprecedented times in terms of people needing to contact their reps and demand action.
Yeah. So like that was half of my day most days.
Okay.
And as we got closer to the NAFTA vote, it became a full time. So I would do that in the mornings every day. And then in the afternoons, I would either like run errands, which could involve like carrying stuff back and forth to the floor for the representative, for our congressman. It could be giving tours to constituents who had come to visit. I did a lot of that because I was good at it and really enjoyed it, and had taken the time to learn about the art and the history of the Capitol and stuff like that. I worked for the Rules Committee one summer, which the Rules Committee basically determines the amount of time and the context in which bills are discussed on the floor. And it is the place where the majority basically determines whether or not something is going to land for discussion on the floor and the constraints under which that discussion will be made. So I did a lot of like running stuff back and forth to different offices back then, because we didn't have email. Right. This was 93. So everything was paper memos, and it would either go into the interoffice mail, which was picked up multiple times a day, or if it needed to be taken to another member's office, somebody would run it over there physically. The answering emails. Now, just to be clear, 30 years ago, long time ago, things changed. The volume of message that they're getting now is probably substantially, like several orders of magnitude higher.
Right, just because the barrier to communication is so much lower. Right?
Yeah, like back then you had to put a piece of paper into a fax machine and dial a number and get through, or you had to like put a stamp on something and send mail. Since that time, there have been multiple attacks on congressional leaders. So like the process for mail is dramatically different now. It goes through multiple screening processes offsite before they see it at the Capitol. So it's a very slow way to get your message to Congress. You're much better off. It's fine to send paper mail, but if it's something that is time sensitive, like the current situation, you're better off sending an email, as I understand it.
You can't sprinkle anthrax into an email, so it's probably going to get there quite a bit faster.
Tweets are essentially useless. So like you can shit post all you want, but if you want your congressional representatives or your senator to pay attention to it, send an email. That's
interesting to hear, because I mean I'm sure a decent number of people, myself included to some extent, have the kind of jaded perspective that all of those messages are probably at best getting met with an eye roll from a staffer and then getting flushed down the toilet. So hearing that they actually do care to some degree what they hear from their constituents is kind of nice.
So the thing, I mean, that depends. That varies probably on a representative by representative basis, how much they pay attention to stuff,
and how much, how safe the seat that they're in is, and that kind of thing. I'm sure.
Right. The thing I will say is, if you send an email, usually the thing to do is to use the form on the members' House.gov or Senate.gov website, because those go directly into the system. Put your name and address and zip code so they know you're one of their constituents. Because the thing that is always true is that if somebody from another district, another representative's area sent us a letter, it just went straight in the trash. right? You don't bother reading. I don't know if that's the same in the House leader or the Senate leader or whatever's offices, because they do have a little bit of a larger role. But for the most part, like, we don't refer them to the other members or anything like that. They go away. The next thing we would do is tally. So we would kind of scan the letter. This one is somebody that wants help with unemployment or Social Security. This is somebody who wants to let you know that they think NAFTA sucks. This one is an obvious crank who thinks that we didn't land on the moon. And we would file them all accordingly, laugh at the cranks, but maintain both a running overall tally of how the constituents felt about a particular topic and how it was changing on a day-by-day basis. So, and that I don't know that the member read it. He read it most days that I was with him. But that was one of the things that, a couple times a day when especially if he was on the floor in committee meetings all day, we would run a packet with the things that he needed to look at and sign or give feedback on immediately, at least twice a day, and sometimes more often than that. And that tally was always part of that, right? Like that was the 3:00 report didn't go out without the tally. And that is like, they look at that and they keep track of that. And even if you are in a district that is hopeless, or you're in a district that is that that your representative believes the same thing you do, it's worth taking a minute. I think every day right now, given the situation we're in, and either sending it through the House.gov or Senate.gov forms for your representatives, each of them, or using something like ResistBot to do it quickly, that lets you send basically a text message that goes in through their email system and lets them know that you're one of their constituents. It's
never been easier.
It literally has never been easier. You just have to spend money to give feedback.
Right. I should probably do that. I mean, for better or worse, my representative is Nancy Pelosi, and I certainly have felt over time that she's going to do what she's going to do because she's been there for so long and is in the leadership. So, like, what can I do personally? But from what you're saying, it sounds like it's never not worth it to reach out.
It's worth letting her know that you support her or you're angry at her and that you vote. And maybe some of both. Like, I never thought that I'd be sitting here on a Saturday when we were recording this after an attempted insurrection on Wednesday, and that the person who attempted the insurrection would still be the president on 4 days later.
It is unthinkable. We'll get into that in a minute. Just kind of some of the little manifestations of the situation in day-to-day life is one of the things I wanted to touch on. But before we move on to that, I just wanted to ask you, since we're talking about your time there, here's a kind of an ignorant Civics 101 question. Are all the congressional offices in the Capitol building, or are they in like adjacent buildings around the Capitol? Is that just where the collective business takes place? So leadership has offices in the building. So McConnell, I think Pelosi, Price Denny Hoyer, McCarthy, yeah. Schumer all have small offices in the building. They'll also have offices, much larger offices in the surrounding office buildings. So on the Senate side, there's three. There were three then. I think there's another one now. Senate office buildings. On the House side, there's 3 or maybe 4 House office buildings now. Oh, that was actually some of the first news stories that were going around after it became clear that things were really getting bad. You were starting to see like, building X, I forget some of the names, like this building is being evacuated.
House office building
names like that were starting to go around of like, this office building is being evacuated. They're being told to report to the super top secret tunnels underneath the building and stuff like that.
Yeah. So the tunnels aren't super top secret. They used to be open to the public. I don't know that they still are.
Yeah.
But
it's more like emergency tunnels, I guess.
No. Those are the ones that the members use to get from the House office buildings.
Oh, you mean the little congressional subway?
So there's a congressional subway, but there's also just walking paths on those tunnels.
Okay. I thought these were more sort of emergency evacuation type tunnels.
They're like heavily trafficked day to day.
I see. Okay. It immediately conjured images of like Cold War era, like hardened escape tunnels and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's not like the Eisenhower escape tunnel from the White House. These are big, wide, like 30 or 40 foot wide tunnels. They often have like art installations from constituents, from kids and stuff like that in there. So if they do like a draw how your country makes you feel contest for second graders in Des Moines, they'll put the art up there for a couple of weeks. The tunnels. So just to be clear, there have been, I think, 3 major security incidents in the time since I was there. There was a bombing threat in like 95 or 96. There was a shooting at one point, and then there was 9/11, which impacted all federal security. At the time I was there, you went through metal detectors to go into all of the House office buildings. All of those entrances were lightly secured, and there was like a Capitol cop at each of them. But most of those Capitol cops weren't armed. It felt more like a campus PD than like a actual, like, more like a campus PD than something like TSA does today, even. Right. It was very light. The same cops work the same stations every day. I got to know them as an intern working there 2 months a year for 2 years. And like members don't go through security so this is the other thing to know. Members and senators will be all over that campus all day long on most days. So there's their food. They have a member seating on the House side and a Senate cafeteria or Senate dining room on the other side. And those are open to senators and their guests and members and their guests. But like they're also in the rules in the offices for the committees, because while the committees may have like a hearing room on the Hill in the Capitol itself, they don't necessarily have offices for all the people, all the lawyers and all the legislative assistants and all the staffers that work for those committees. And each of those committees, the Rules Committee, the Judiciary, the Finance, the Foreign Affairs, the Military, the Defense, all of the different committees have like 10 to 50 people on staff. Right. So those offices are all in the office buildings on the edges of the Congressional Hill as well.
OK, it's actually, since you mentioned it, when people use that phrase on the Hill colloquially, I mean, I assume they're talking about that entire complex and not just
the entire complex.
Not just the Capitol building. OK.
Yeah. And kind of the library, like up to the Library of Congress and stuff like that, even.
Right. So I assume you must have spent at least some time in the Capitol itself. Like, I guess, what we're building up to here is, hey, that's the building that was breached primarily. So like, I'm curious, like what your experience was.
The office buildings as well, as my understanding.
Did they get in? Oh, really?
Okay. Or they had to vacate the office buildings because of the bomb threats, and then people were able to get in there.
Right. But primarily, that's most of the footage you saw, and obviously that's where the electoral vote certification was taking place. And you've been in that building. I just kind of wanted to get a sense of like both operationally and also a little bit more like I don't know, it's patriotic and reverential. Like, what is the feeling in that building? Like you see people talking about like, oh, there's so much history and reverence for the nation here. And like, I don't know, just kind of just an open-ended question of like what it means to you, having been in there and worked there, to think about this kind of breach taking place.
So I spent a lot. You spent a lot of time there because like if you're the gopher, you go where the congressman is, and he's on, you wait for him outside the floor at the exit he prefers, and you go to the committee room where he is, and when there's a recess, you hand him the paperwork that he needs, right? And that happened constantly. And then also, like I said, I gave tours on the reg, so that was a large part of a lot of my afternoons because I was good at it and I enjoyed talking to people and I was personable, and the other interns were kind of trolls one summer I was there. So the feeling, so there's I've never been to Europe and I haven't done tours like of castles that are thousands of years old, but there's not a lot of places in the US where you can walk around and you feel the weight of history. You know what I mean? Like we're young and most of our places are new. And the last time I was in a building that was more than 200 years ago was probably 200 years old was probably 10 years ago. You feel it's the thing that Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote in Hamilton, that you feel the weight of history and you feel that history has its eyes on you, even if you're just a 19-year-old intern, walking, carrying paperwork, inconsequential paperwork to one of 438 representatives on a Tuesday afternoon. And, part of it is the architecture and part of it is the art. But the big thing, I think, for me was thinking about all of so many of the decisions that shaped our country and the world in a lot of ways were made in that building. And, both good and bad. Like we have, as a country, made horrific mistakes. We've also done a lot of good. And And you feel that, and you think about that every single day. And that's one of the reasons that, like, when I was there, and one of the best things about that job, I loved giving tours. One of the best things about that job was going on an afternoon that I was free, or if I had 30 minutes to kill, I could go sit up in the gallery anytime I wanted and watch the proceedings, right, in the House or the Senate, whichever one I wanted. And it was absolutely like the procedural shenanigans, especially like Mitch McConnell is a bad man, right? Like, just to be clear, I think he is maybe the most damaging Senate Majority Leader we've had in the last in modern times.
Certainly one of the like top 3 most dire figures in American politics in the last quarter century or something.
I mean, but I didn't understand where he was coming from until he gave that speech the other day. And it's the speech that's going to define his legacy, the one that started before the riots and finished after the riots on during the electoral vote count. And like, it's pretty clear that he sees himself as the way the framers, or at least what he tells himself to sleep at night, I guess, is that he sees himself as the speed bump to slow the pace of change demanded by the rabble. Right. Which is what the framers intended.
His noblesse oblige, you mean?
Yes, exactly. I mean, he also clearly loves to give tax cuts to billionaires and all the other evil shit that Republicans stand for these days. But it was always fascinating watching the push and pull of government. And then the other thing that was fascinating was like going to the after hours events, whether it's, something that some lobbyist put on or a cocktail reception or whatever, and standing there and holding the bag while the representatives were talking to each other and actually deciding where they were going to meet. And as I understand it, I haven't been there since this happened, but as I understand it, that's one of the things that Gingrich's regime stopped, was the kind of out of office cross-pollination across the aisle, which is where a lot of government happened. Not that that's a good thing, but it was working better then than I think it is now.
Sure.
Anyway, so yeah, watching a bunch of yahoos break into this place that I couldn't, like, I found it at 18 years old impossible to walk up a stairway, like even one of the service stairways, not the big wide marble ones, but like the hidden back stairways that the staff use. It made me feel physically ill. We haven't had a foreign power overrun our country in 200 years.
Right.
I have to imagine it's what, Dolly Madison felt like as she was grabbing George Washington's portrait as the British were about to smash the doors of the White House. Right.
Yeah.
It's the thing that's important about that building isn't the building. It's not the architecture. It's not even the people in there. It's the history, and it's the shared belief that what we're doing is right, even when it often isn't. And that is the thing that was defiled by the president's attempted insurrection on Wednesday.
Yeah, I think when you get down to it, yes, we have all just collectively witnessed, or we've experienced a moment of national trauma, right?
Yeah.
Like seeing people active in neo-Nazi movements and adorned in, fascist iconography of various sorts, storming and overrunning our seat of government is, yes, obviously say what you want about this nation's many sins historically and so forth, but like they profaned what is basically a sacred place.
Well,
and
this may be naive. I feel like the people, I feel like more often than not, the intentions are good, even if the actions are bad. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Sure.
The further back in time you go, the worse that gets, probably.
We don't need to get too deep into that. I mean, everybody is the hero of their own story, right?
Yes, very true.
Even the fascists, but from this kind of dovetails with the actual theme of this podcast. Like there's the kind of basic infosec aspect of all those terminals were left unlocked and like files were stolen. I don't think they've gotten super specific, but there have been some stories coming out that, what was the term they used? National security equities were stolen.
Yeah. I don't know what that means. I tried to find that out and it's not defined.
The little I could tell, I took that to just mean that that's just a generic term for like any kind of information or files of national security value. But the point is, like, a lot of sort of digital information was just sitting there out in the open that has now been accessed by who knows.
Yeah, I mean, if you thought Hunter Biden's laptop was a bad right-wing news red herring, guess what? Pelosi's laptop's going to be worse.
But I don't know that either of us have any real special insight into that topic, but it is a topic to discuss that a lot of security has been breached in the course of this, along with the human aspect.
I spent a lot of time yesterday reading about from the infosec community about what the rational, insane response to unfettered access, an unknown mob having unfettered access to the Capitol and members' offices and things like that was. And the consensus seemed to be that everything from the power plugs on up should be treated as suspect until it's cleared. And that if there weren't foreign governments, both friendly and antagonistic, participating in that mob, either through proxies or with people on the ground, they would be shocked. So
okay.
I would assume that every piece of electronics in the Capitol has to be replaced. And that somebody from the NSA or CIA or whoever does this, FBI, is probably going through all of that, and they're going to find a whole bunch of brand new 0 days on all of those devices. Because, it's as easy as plugging a USB thumb drive in some cases and just, letting the software do its magic.
Yeah. Fun times. A lot of stuff to unpack from this event, I guess. The thing that kind of made me think of doing this episode this way in the first place was when we asked for suggestions on the Discord, and somebody, I apologize, I can't remember who, but somebody suggested hey, what techie ways did you keep up with all this shit going on? And that kind of made me think it did make me think back to that morning. I mean, I went into it. I've been a very anxious person by nature, but I have been quite worried about the 6th of January for the better part of a month, because you didn't have to go very far online to see the very people who ended up perpetrating this talking about exactly what they were going to do.
Yep.
So it wasn't a huge surprise, but I kind of went into that morning thinking okay, this is it. I better hunker down at the computer. I've got work to do, but I'm going to have this, and this open to try to keep track of it. And obviously within 45 minutes, all work ceased because of what began to transpire. But I thought we could talk about what was that like for you and for me in terms of trying to absorb all this stuff? I don't know about you, but I had a couple of news channels open and about 50 Twitter tabs probably at any given point. A couple of Twitch streams from anti people who've been covering protests for the last year. Yeah, that's an interesting topic there. The split now between do you stick with sort of quote unquote vetted cable news, major accredited news outlets, or like you said, kind of citizen reporting, on the ground live streaming type stuff has become a lot more prominent, especially since the protests and kind of civil unrest last summer. That is becoming an increasingly valid and kind of up to the minute way to get information for the most part.
I found that this summer, the only way to actually see what was happening on the ground at those protests was to be at them or to be watching a bunch of streams from people that were on the ground.
Those protests, I absolutely agree, but particularly with respect to the
and just to be clear, an aggregate of a bunch of people, not just one.
Yes.
It's easy to have one person present a very skewed look at what a protest on the ground looks like.
Yeah. Although, I mean, that was a slightly different situation because, I mean, in that context, a lot of what needed to be reported on was police brutality that the authorities would much rather you not see. Whereas this is much more of a singular developing situation that is unprecedented,
Yeah.
This was sadly, we have many years of experience of protests being
quashed,
brutally suppressed, and the evidence not necessarily being aired in public, versus what happened on Wednesday being something that nobody in living memory has experience of. So that was much more of a what the fuck, man. It was there was about a 2-hour window there where it was just hackles raised, just hair standing up in the back of your neck as one thing or another would trickle out. It's oh my God, they've breached the Capitol. And then there's and this is a topic for kind of social media analysis of the ability of one tweet to go around and and nearly incite a panic. And the tweet in this case that I'm thinking of is the one that said, In essence, the Department of Defense has denied the request to deploy the National Guard.
Oh, there were two for me. That one, and then I think it's a Business Week or a Bloomberg reporter who was on the pool he was one of the pool reporters who was in the gallery that day, who said there have been shots fired on the House floor, and that was it.
Yes, those are those two for sure.
Those two were both real bad.
Yeah, but the one about the National Guard in particular was suddenly a moment of like, oh, is this not just a spontaneous thing among rabble rousers?
Yeah.
Is there institutional support behind this is the question that tweet raised is what I mean. And like, because individual tweets are so easily shared, something like that can really make the rounds before there's any real context given to it.
Well, so for me, the antidote to that is to follow. I went, and it was easy to figure out who the pool reporters that still had phone service were at that point. And we were Gina and I were both watching both of those people on the reg. It's funny. I've been reporting QAnon posters for the last 2 months on the reg on Twitter, and my Twitter mentions right now are just like, hey, somebody liked this. Somebody liked this. Here's an update. Somebody liked this. Somebody liked this. Here's an update. And they're all just getting banned, which fucking finally, good job, I guess, Twitter. I don't know.
God, that's a whole other topic, is the kind of crazy wave of bans that has been issued in the last 12 hours.
I would say long overdue rather than crazy. I think the sane thing was to ban them. I don't think. Anyway,
we're recording this midday Saturday, and the president has been banned permanently from Twitter, from Facebook, from you name it.
YouTube, everywhere, I believe. Shopify
shut down all their retail operations. I mean, it's pretty.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. It's pretty extensive at this point.
So yeah, I mean, for me, it was looking at all the sources that I could find, watching what was on the news, because they were curating those things. I mean, the incredible thing about all this is that, and I think the thing that is one of the things that's going to hose the president in the end is that these people felt like they were empowered by his authority, and didn't even feel the need to conceal their faces as they were committing seditious acts. So, I mean, but the way I managed it was by watching as much as I could. And making sure that the sources were at least fairly legitimate. Or, I mean, in some cases, like the video of the cop that the protester, the mob opened the door. See, this is another thing. Language is important. I almost called the people that broke into the Capitol protesters, which is absolutely incorrect. We have to use the words that describe what these people are, and they're mob or they're insurrectionist or whatever. Yeah. Like, I recognize that stairway, right? Huh. The stairway, there's a big stairway on the Capitol, on the House side, that's like the grand stairway that goes from the area, the speaker's lobby outside the House chambers up to the viewing balcony above, the gallery above. And it has this huge picture painting of George Washington that's like 25 feet wide on it. And it's gorgeous. It's an amazing painting. And it is one of those areas of the Capitol that the Hall of Statues and the Central Rotunda all remind you that you're in a place that's important, and a place that you can literally sit in the spot in the Hall of Statues, which used to be the Senate chamber before they added the additional wings on the House. And you can sit in the spot where Henry Clay would sit. And because of the arched nature of the ceiling, he could hear somebody at another desk across the room. And because senators have always had assigned seats, he could just sit there and hear everything that they were whispering about on the other side of the room whenever he wanted to sit down at his desk for 5 minutes. And you could do it. It still works. Like I think they have it stanchioned off now. But when I was there, you take people on tours and you put a kid over in the listening area, and then the adults would go stand in the talking area, and it works every time. It's fabulous. Like seeing, I mean, it just made me unbelievably sad for our country, for the state that we've reached.
And angry.
and angry at the people who both encouraged it and allowed it to happen. Like, I think this is the reason we all need to be writing to our representatives, like I said, whether they agree with you or disagree with you, every single day, to let them know that this cannot stand. Like, we have this is the kind of warning sign that if your republic survives the first time, you're incredibly lucky, and we need to treat it like we have like a problem that has to be solved for the health of the union.
You don't have to go far in history to find examples of people who try to orchestrate things like this getting a slap on the wrist and then it going very bad the second time.
Yeah, don't let people beta test a revolution.
Yes, it turns out. I don't even know like really what the run of show is here. This is just kind of a stream of consciousness. But one of the things that always gets to me around situations like this, and unfortunately we've been having this experience more and more over the last handful of years, is the kind of juxtaposition of the mundane and the extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know, like extraordinary things couched in like very mundane day-to-day sort of settings. And like one of those is something I took a screenshot of that morning, which is that I was using Xfinity with the cable login to watch cable news. And they've got their recommendation engine just like everybody does. And like on the front page, when I loaded it, at the top, it says Xfinity Stream, which is the logo. And then there's the little For You column. And then featured, and the first promotional unit, U.S. Capitol breached.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like
the American Fascism show, the season finale is a real banger, Brad.
Totally. Like normally they'd be serving up like, I don't know, Great British Bake Off in that unit, or, you know, you name it, Anderson Cooper, or just like something super whatever. Right. And yet, like, you know, like the idea that somebody typed the words U.S. Capitol breached into some CMS to spit out this recommendation is just like hard to grapple with. You know what I mean? Like,
here's another fun thing to think about. So I think we all agree that it's good that Twitter finally banned Trump from their platform. However, for the last 5 years, maybe longer than that, people have been embedding his tweets in news articles around the web.
Yeah.
And because his account is banned and gone, now all of those tweets are gone. All those links are dead. So you have all these articles about the president misbehaving or posting things that are insane. And now the references for those, if people didn't screenshot them and embed them, are gone. So I think, this is a warning sign for journalists in the future to not use the embedded, the basic embeds for any social media post, and to screenshot and save those rather than embed them. And two, it's a question for Twitter about what they're going to do. I hope that at some point in the not too distant future, they'll restore the past tweets without allowing him access to new tweets and remove the ones that are potentially inflammatory.
Yeah. Yes, there's a legitimate archival need there for sure. And I have to imagine they can engineer that even if it's in a bespoke way, right? Even if their system doesn't actually support it.
Yeah, it's worth doing it even if they don't support it.
As of this recording, last I checked, I don't think Apple had removed Parler from their app store. Had they? Google did that last night. Do you know?
Parler was removed from Google, was suspended from Google. Apple gave them 24 hours or 12 hours, I can't remember, to add moderation. Which, judging by my browsing Parler this morning, it seems like they have not managed to do yet.
Okay,
I think the Apple response to this seems especially cowardly, given that there are people fomenting active revolution on that app right now.
Yeah, I'm shocked that they didn't follow Google's lead almost immediately.
Right, like giving them 24 hours to remove to add moderation at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon Pacific time is essentially saying, hey, yo, dog, we're just going to turn you off in 24 hours regardless.
Yeah.
So why not just kill the product, the service at that point, to kill the app at that point? Yeah. The next thing is people are going to go after their hosts. I think Parler is hosted on AWS. So that's the next. Amazon has to decide whether they want to allow that on their servers or not.
Yeah.
What other, are we forgetting other thing? I mean, the other thing that struck me, Hollywood, who is a Twitter person who I've enjoyed her work over the years about politics and fascism and the late stage capitalism and apparently also like millennial/Gen Z dating rituals. Posted that on left Twitter, people have been like sand off your fingerprints and use Signal and encrypt everything and be ultra paranoid. And meanwhile, this whole thing was planned on like open Facebook groups and advertised by the president on Twitter and public forums and things like that. So, you know, that's a thing to think about.
I suppose so.
Do that again.
Yeah.
But, yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I get so frustrated. I've seen people in the last couple days saying like dredging up a tweet from some reporter or writer from like 3 weeks ago, like, you know, a few days before Christmas or something, going like, look, this person predicted everything they did on January 6th. It's amazing. Like he figured it all out. He got all of it. And it's like, you
didn't have to fucking predict it. They told you they were going to do it.
Yes. I was looking at that shit throughout the break, which is not a healthy way to spend your holiday break, but like, nobody predicted anything. They were flat out proclaiming exactly what happened for 3 weeks before it happened. Like, it's just such an unbelievable breakdown of like security protocol and information gathering and like equal application of like security in the law, quite frankly. Like,
I'm sure there's a cognitive fallacy, a cognitive studies fallacy or whatever for this. But I mean, the thing that that Trump has skated by on so often is that he says so many insane things that people just say, "Oh yeah, don't believe what he says." He doesn't actually. He can't believe that. That's not real. We're 4 years in. He's tried to have an insurrection. We like believe what he says. If he tells you he's going to have like when he posts that he's not going to be at the inauguration as a fucking dog whistle to go attack the inauguration, please believe him for the love of God. Yeah. Like the number of times he said I want to ban, you know, Muslims from entering the country. Oh, he can't possibly mean that. That would be insane. And then
5 days into the term,
5 days after he was the president, he wrote an executive order that tried to ban Muslims from entering the country. It's yeah. When the fascist says I'm going to do fascist stuff, believe the fascist in the future.
Believe the autocrat. That's the Masha Gessen advice, which has proved to be quite apt.
It turns out you listen to the people who've survived autocratic and authoritarian regimes and said, hey, here are a bunch of bad things that are going to happen. Maybe we should have listened to them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know about you. I feel okay, I guess, now, as good as could be expected.
I mean, I'm
incredibly concerned about the next 12 days.
I was going to say as good as can be expected, given that they have not removed him from fucking office yet.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the one thing I will say about the fact that we haven't started impeachment proceedings here 4 days after is that there are good reasons that it takes a long time to start a process like this, right? Like writing the articles of impeachment isn't as simple as copying, pasting the last ones and finding and replacing Ukraine for insurrection or sedition, right? Like if they don't get that stuff right, then it won't work. And and it's like casting a magic spell. You have to have all the bits and pieces in place before you start chucking stuff into the pot. The not invoking the 25th Amendment when he waited for 90-ish minutes without answering calls from the Capitol from our elected leaders to send in the National Guard and federal agents to help with the mob that was storming the Capitol is the thing that he should be impeached, convicted, and sent to jail for.
Absolutely. Well, one of several.
I mean, look, if nothing else sticks, I hope. There's one more thing I want to talk about while we're here and burning bridges with all the 5 Republican listeners that are left. I hope that the members of House and Congress that spent multiple hours hiding on the floor under desks trying to get anything between them and potential shooters, I hope that they remember what that feels like for the rest of their lives, And I hope that every single time there's a gun control bill or they have, moms demand people wanting to meet with them that they won't talk to, I hope they remember what it feels like to be under the threat of the active shooters, because that's something that every time we do an active shooter drill at my daughter's school, she comes home, she cries, she tells us what it was like. We tell her it's going to be okay, even though I know it fucking for sure is not going to be okay if we're ever in that actual situation. And we put our 5-year-olds and our 10-year-olds and our 18-year-olds through this multiple times a year, and fuck them for not doing anything about gun control in this country. Yeah. Because it's asinine. It's asinine that people stormed the Michigan Capitol with guns and we couldn't remove them. It's asinine that there were multiple people carrying firearms into the Capitol because we couldn't control them. It's time. And when these people are voting to not convict Donald Trump next week for an impeachment, or to use rules committee bullshit to make sure that the articles of impeachment don't show up on the Senate until after McConnell's not in charge anymore, I want them to think about what it felt like to be laying on the floor and wondering if they were going to survive the next hour at the angry mob that the president sicked on them. Yeah. And that's it. That's I've said. That's my piece.
Yeah. Well, all said. Enough said. I guess that's it. I don't know. I think we're all just kind of like stunned and heartbroken and angry and not sure what to do next here.
I mean, so the thing to do next there, as a citizen of the United States in a district where you have a representative and 2 senators that represent you, you have an easy thing to do. Whether you believe that they agree with you or not, you need to send them a letter that says, hey, I would like you to do something about the armed insurrection. This is not something that will pass. We do not need unity. We do not need thoughts and prayers. We need action taken against the people that both broke into the Capitol and instigated the break into the Capitol, or else this will happen again. And the next time we all may not be so lucky. Yep. And
Yes, that has to be the takeaway from this, if nothing else. If people don't get anything else through their heads about this, it is that if this is not, if the people responsible for this are not held accountable to the fullest possible extent, it's going to happen again.
The fact that we got a second chance to fix this, the fact that we have the ability to have a second chance to fix this problem is a blessing. We are unbelievably lucky. We will not get a third chance.
Yeah.
So we need to behave in every way. I put this in my letters too. I'm sending a slightly different letter every day to my representatives who probably all agree with me completely, but like they need to be reminded constantly. We will not get a third chance to fix this problem. Yes. And we need to take advantage of it now.
Yep.
And I guess on that note, let's thank our patrons for supporting the show.
Yes.
As always, thank you everyone who supports the show. I want to shout out the folks in the Discord because we still don't have moderators even after this week. I think I had to ask people not to be kind once, not necessarily to fascist, but just in general.
Yeah.
And I asked people not to post any videos that they wouldn't want their kids to see.
Yeah, sure. It's a good policy.
But overall, even in times of great turmoil, people were incredibly well behaved, and I'm proud to be part of that community. And I was incredibly grateful this week to have places where we could come and talk about this in an adult and frank and thoughtful way.
Yeah, I should have mentioned
I
should have mentioned it earlier that Discord was a not insignificant part of my kind of digital, array of resources on the day.
Having like I was in 3 different Discords. I was in a couple that were shared with some small ones with friends, and then our Discord, and then the one for my Twitch channel at Will Smith, and all of those places were a large part of the filtering process for what was important, who was writing thoughtful things that were worth reading, who what was going on outside of the sphere of my friend group, which is mostly middle-aged white guys. And it's incredibly valuable and helpful and good and important. So
Absolutely.
thank you all.
Yes.
Extra special thanks to our executive producer level patrons, the Bunny Fiend, Jacob Chappell, Andrew Cotton, David Allen, and James Kamek. We appreciate you all so much.
Absolutely.
And if you would like to support the podcast and support the Patreon, I'm sure we'll get a couple of angry unsubscribes this week from people who are like, fuck you. You're going to talk bad about Republicans. I'm leaving. I'm like, that's fine. See ya. Take your money someplace else.
You know, to whatever extent they deserve credit, there are plenty of Republicans who should have broken ranks long before now who have finally done so in the last few days.
That is absolutely, yeah.
Like I can't give them much credit, but like it's worthy of recognition.
I had a family member who thought I was a lunatic for the last 5 years who sent me a note yesterday and apologized. And I was like, I never thought I would speak to you again. So, hey, welcome back. It's good to hear from you.
Yeah, honestly, like I am not always the person who, when somebody finally comes around months to years after they should have, to say, fuck you, where were you 2 years ago? Like to some extent, there has always got to be some potential for repentance, you know.
I will never forgive the people who vote to, not convict Trump on this, right, in the Senate.
Yes.
But look, I voted for Bush in 2000. We all make mistakes.
Fair.
If I had that to do over again, probably would. I didn't live in Florida, so it didn't matter. But like, look, it is never too late to look up and say, hey, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have believed what this lunatic was saying. I really like The Apprentice. Fuck, I don't know, man. I watched The Apprentice. We all make mistakes, Brad.
Yeah. I mean, the only point I'm making is that even among Republicans, there are quite a few people in the last few days that seem to have had their heads screwed on straight finally after living in delusion for too long.
I guess my point is I don't feel like I would self-identify as a Republican after the events of the last few weeks. But yeah, if you recant Trump, you're welcome. We're happy to have you. That's it. You can find the Patreon at patreon.com/techpod. If you want to support it, awesome. We love you. We love you either way, unless you're supporting fascism in America, in which case get wrecked. I guess that's it.
Yeah. Stay safe, everybody.
Yes. Please be safe. Here's one more thing that's important. If this is all overwhelming and you need to take a minute and do something else, take a break away from the madness of our current thing, that's fine. The most important thing you can do is send your letter to your representatives. After you do that, you don't feel compelled to stay glued to the TV or the Twitter or the Discords. Like, everybody needs to go do something and be a normal human being and make some food and take a shower and go on a walk and wear a mask and, talk to your loved ones and do things that are not this.
Yes.
And we have to take care of ourselves. But anyway, thank you all so much. And we'll be back next week with hopefully a more normal tech pod, I hope.
God only knows.
Yeah, fingers crossed.